Hello, my guest today is Jimmy Vignola from Rand Engineering. We're going to be discussing parking garage inspections generally with a focus on New York City laws, although there's also a statewide mandate. And we're also going to touch briefly on electrical vehicles charging stations and parking garages. Rand Engineering and Architecture is an over 100-person consulting firm. They've been in business for over 30 years. They serve the New York City metropolitan area, and Rand evaluates building systems and then designs, specifies, and administers programs for repairs, upgrades, and restoration. They offer a full range of engineering and architectural services, including building envelopes, including roofs, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, architectural design, building code, and zoning compliance, instructional engineering. Welcome, Jimmy, and thank you for spending some time today to inform our audience about Local Law 126, that requires garage inspections and has an August 1st filing deadline. I know that was a mouthful. So welcome, Jimmy.
Thanks, Stephen. Great to be here.
So before we get into Local Law 126 and garage inspections generally, can you just tell us a little bit about your background? I already talked about Rand a little bit, but whatever you want to add to that and just, your sort of experience.
Sure. I am the chief structural engineer here at Rand Engineering. So I manage a team of about 10 to 12 structural engineers. I myself have been doing structural engineering for 20 years, licensed in New York, New Jersey. I'm licensed by a national organization. So I'm called a model law engineer, can get licensed in any state very easily if you ask me to. And, I've been at Rand for almost 6 years now. So I have, diverse experience in the, other parts of the industry, working on all types of projects, residential, commercial, working with the MTA. So I've seen quite a few things. I spent 9 years on the board of governors at the SEONI, the Structural Engineers Association of New York. So I had, including being the president there several years ago. So, pretty well versed in structural engineering and the industry here in New York.
Sure. So Local Law 126, I know that there's a statewide law mandating parking garage inspections, and then Local Law 126 is the New York version. But can you just tell us sort of how, I guess, maybe a little background about the state law, and we're really focused on Local Law 126, and just tell us about, 126, and it's known as PIPS. Just explain to our audience, what that means.
Sure, I can do that. One thing the structural engineering community, we're used to is progress only comes when there's an incident. So there was a big garage collapse up near Binghamton, a town outside of Binghamton in 2015. I don't think anyone died, but there was a lot of damage. So that incident, that collapse, spurred the state of New York to require that all garages get periodically inspected every so often. Within a year or two, there had been a state law passed that required every garage get inspected, I think, every 3 years. Because New York City, the building department is so, large, and they have their own compliance, procedures and requirements, the law did not immediately go into effect into New York City. They always needed to put it into effect. So that finally went into effect in 2022. Local Law 126 is the local law that finally instituted the parking structure inspections. Local Law 126 actually is not specific for the parking inspections. It actually was the passage of the entire new 2022 building code. So that included many changes to the building code besides this, but one particular section that was revised, added to the building code, required these periodic inspections of parking structures. So we are now using that acronym PIPS, periodic inspection of parking structures, to describe this process to any of your listeners that are familiar with FISP, the facade inspection and safety program. There's a lot of parallels between this new PIPS process and FISP, which I think is going into the 10th cycle soon. So New York City, residents, people that are familiar with those, this will be very, very familiar as we get into, the steps in an inspection.
Right. And then does this just explain how it covers different, regions or areas of the city and the different cycles, I guess, in brief.
Sure. Cycle one started in 2022. It's a 6-year cycle broken up into 3 subcycles: 1A, 1B, 1C. 1A is covered Lower Manhattan and the Upper West Side. That actually is complete. We're out of 1A. So if you live in those areas, garage in those areas really should have been inspected. Report should have been filed by the end of 2023. So we're now into 1B, which is Upper Manhattan and Brooklyn. That goes to the end of 2025. So we have until, about a year and a half here, a little less, or a little more, to complete 1B garages. And then 1C is Staten Island, Queens, and the Bronx. So all of those garages will need to be inspected in 27, 28. So plenty of time for those people to get going.
So does the August, there's been a lot of talk about the August 1st deadline. Does that apply? And maybe you already answered this, but does the August 1st deadline apply to all buildings, or is it just to the ones in their current cycle?
Yeah, the August 1st deadline for what DOB is calling it an initial observation report only applies to 1B and 1C. Theoretically, 1A, you did your full report by the end of last year. So DOB won't even accept an initial observation report for a 1A garage. You got to be a 1B or a 1C. 1B, some of the 1B garages have submitted a full report already. So if you did a full report, you don't need to do this initial observation report. But reality of the situation is the vast majority of buildings in 1B and all of the 1C garages need this August 1st report. The August 1st report, was added on top of local law 126 PIPS, right? This is not part of the original program. It was added on top after the pretty well-known Ann Street garage collapse, about a year ago, a little over a year ago. After that, DOB, I guess, realized that some of these garages, there might be some garages out there that might collapse before their due date, right? I mean, you have some garages that the inspection doesn't need to be completed before the end of 2027. So, they want to make sure an engineer goes out there and sort of like triages the very, very worst garages, and, so that DOB can get their eyes on those, that might be collapsing in the next year or 4 before they do.
Right, that makes sense. So what about if, I'm just curious, what if you were a 1A garage and you fell into that category, you're on the Upper West Side or Lower Manhattan, and you didn't file your inspection report or the initial inspection report already? Is DOB monitoring that and issuing violations, or do you know if they've been enforcing that?
I haven't heard of any of those yet, failure to file, right? That's what that would be called. I haven't heard any of those yet. I think DOB's got their hands full right now. You're right. This is new compliance for them also. So, they're focused on unsafe. But right, like when you once you file, right? I mean, so, if you're a 1A garage and you say, oh no, we forgot, I got a couple of 1A garages that we're working on right now. Once we file those, yes, you're going to get a violation, right? You're going to get the violation for failure to file or late filing, whatever is applicable.
Right, but they need to do that sooner. I mean, it's not going to get better over time. So if you fall into that category of a 1A garage owner, you should do it right away.
Yeah. It's the fines every month, right? I think it's $1,000 every month that you don't file, and then if you go a full 12 months, there's like an additional like 10,000 on top of it.
Right.
So you're talking over 20,000 per year. And it'll just keep going, right? I mean, if you don't file for 10 years, it'll be $200,000 when you get around to doing it.
So what about the type? I mean, we talked about the geographic areas, but I think some people might have questions about what's covered. Is a parking lot covered? How big does the garage have to be?
Yeah, the exemptions are for, single family and 2-family homes don't need to file a garage inspection. A garage needs to have 3 spaces. So, kind of similar to that. And it needs to be used for parking, so auto body shops, car dealerships, things like that that are not used for parking, are exempt. Parking lots also exempt, right? It needs to be an attached structure. So again, nuance to everything, right? I had a client that they had what they called a parking lot in their backyard. But this was a 8-family unit, it was that parking lot was on the roof of the basement. So that actually requires being, inspected. That's part of the program because it's parking on the roof of a structure, right? So so that there's always little nuances. We get a lot of calls from people saying, is this, do I need to inspect this? Or another common one is like it's you know open, right? You can just drive in and out. There's no walls, but the building is above it.
Right.
That's attached, right? It's attached to the structure. So even though it feels like a parking lot, there's no walls to speak of. That's a parking structure according to DOB, and it needs to be inspected. Yeah, that is it doesn't need to be enclosed, can be enclosed, unenclosed, but it's this attached kind of criteria that seems to drive a lot of them.
Sure. So what does a typical PIPS inspection entail? Like what are the things an inspector is looking for?
So we the way we normally do it, we've done quite a few of these, so we have a good process down. We'll have an inspector head out, do an initial kind of walkthrough, looking at all of the conditions. It requires the DOB, the program requires a certain amount of physical examination, right? Those words. So it can't be visual only. We have to get our hands on at some point. So a small garage, maybe it's got 8 cars. We send the guy out. He can do the physical examination that day, right? We have some tools, we sound concrete, sound steel, if that's something, people are familiar with. We have these tools, you kind of, you know, run them over the concrete. We're listening for hollow sounding areas, obvious visual, observation. And there's a whole, menu of things that we have to look at: slabs, beams, columns, the booth, the roll-up gates, the lighting fixtures, all that. So visual, we're taking our photos, we're taking our notes. We do have to prepare plans as part of this inspection report. So, we're taking notes. We have to come back to the office. We have to draw it up and put plans into the report. That's the initial process. Sometimes, again, depending on size, might have to come back once, might have to come back twice. Garages, we've seen four parking spots and we've seen 400, right? So, if you got 400, maybe I'm showing up with 3 guys, 3 days, to get through that initial inspection. We come back, we take all that data, we have to write a report, we have to do calculations, right? The DOB actually is requiring structural calculations for all these reports. So we have to come back, we have to do structural analysis. As part of the process, we also need to sometimes do probes or material testing. That sometimes requires that we bring in a third-party contractor to do removals, to help us with access, right? So we need lifts to get up to the, if it's a very tall ceiling. And then, once we compile the report, we do get through all of those steps. The final step in the process is for us to send out our qualified person. The qualified inspector does the final inspection. So he will review all of the documentation, talk to the inspectors, talk to me as the chief engineer, we decide our recommendations for repair, which needs to be, included in the report. And then he will go out, do that final walkthrough, the final inspection, which is required. And, if anything needs to change, we change it at that time, right? Change it in the report. And then the most important thing, I think, that sticks with people is this classification of the structure, right? We have to check one of 3 boxes on the report. Is the structure safe? Is it unsafe? Or is it the most common category, which is safe with repair and engineering monitoring, that we call that SREM? SREM. Most places require repair. So, that's the process. It is definitely a process. It's taking, probably 2 to 3 months in most cases. It often requires having a contractor come in and help with some removals, probing, some work, so that it's important to plan for that time that whole process
Right,
takes.
so you're saying it's 2 to 3 months to sort of do the detailed inspection and report, is that right?
Yes,
And
yes,
then I know you had mentioned that you need to have I think it's called a qualified inspector, and I think there's an acronym for it. So in essence, an engineering team might be working on it, but ultimately the report has to be filed by a qualified inspector. And how does someone get that credential? Like what makes
yes.
someone a qualified inspector?
That's correct, right? So it's a QPSI, a qualified parking structure inspector. You have to be a PE, and you have to interview with the DOB, right? So you set up an interview with the DOB, and they kind of rapid fire questions at you about, one, the rules of the program, because there's a whole list of rules that we have to follow, and then your general experience, engineering, experience with structures, experience with parking structures, repair, evaluation. They want to know that, the right people are out there. Rand has 2 qualified inspectors on staff. And, I always, remind people, if they want to use other engineering firms besides Rand's, which I don't know why they would, but, sometimes they have to make sure they have a QPSI, right? If it's a PE without the QPSI, that report is worthless. DOB won't even take it.
Right. And then you were talking about the conditions. So you have the SREM, am I saying that right? The SREM condition,
That's
right?
right. That's right.
So
Yeah.
that's well, what's that acronym stand for? Safe.
Safe with repair and engineering monitoring.
Right. All right. So you have that one, which I guess means you're okay. You just have to monitor it. And then you could get an unsafe condition. So let's say you get an unsafe report.
Mhm.
What would immediate actions would an owner have to take? And what do those look like, I guess? I mean, can you give us some examples of like safe or or unsafe, like what you've seen out there?
Sure, sure. So unsafe garages, the first thing is for us, right? We have to report unsafe garages immediately. So we will submit that to DOB. We found an unsafe condition, an unsafe garage. That usually will prompt a DOB inspector to visit the garage within a couple days, a week at the most. He's going to write a violation, and then we and the owner, well, the owner primarily, right? I mean, these things all are written that it's the owner's responsible, right? The owner must begin immediate repairs, right? Again, if he wanted to at that point find another engineer, he could, right? It doesn't have to be me doing the repairs, but usually we're there, right? So that's immediate, right? I mean, that's they want immediate public protection and immediate starting the repairs of the unsafe conditions, right? So again, like I think people are familiar with FISP, so I can make the parallel. You have an unsafe facade, the next day you put up a sidewalk shed. So we have to do something sort of akin to that. A lot of times, you're in the interior of the building, it's a different situation, right? So we're putting in shoring. Sometimes if the unsafe condition is sort of like in the back corner and we can isolate it, we can just sort of close off that area, and restrict access, restrict usage of it if it's a limited unsafe area. But immediate public protection, getting a contractor in to remove, any concrete that might be in danger of falling tomorrow, right? Get them in there, remove that loose material. We put up netting, again, as a public protection, right? In case there's any material that we missed that might be falling down. So those are the main things:
So I
shoring,
mean,
protection.
are those when you have an unsafe condition? Is it almost like apparent to the naked eye? You walk in, and you're like, wow, this doesn't look good, or like,
Sometimes, right? I mean, those are the real unsafe ones, right? Look, there's we have old buildings here in New York City, and there's some buildings where they've been, using these 100-year-old concrete slabs as a parking garage, and they haven't done any repairs at all. So, some of these things we go in and it's like you look at it for 5 seconds as an engineer and no way, no way, this thing is unsafe, and it's immediate, right? Really unsafe ones. Other ones, where it's like technically unsafe because with any program, there's a definition of unsafe, right? The definition of unsafe includes, or the definition of safe actually includes that I can, as a structural engineer, provide structural analysis that proves that the structure as is can safely support the loads, right? So, maybe the structure lost 50% of its capacity. I can determine that on site, but I can still provide a calculation saying, hey, look, it's reduced capacity, but it's safe for what it needs to do. Sometimes we can provide those calculations. So those are the ones we kind of say are technically unsafe, right? Like we saw one a couple of days ago. They had chopped out about 4 feet of the slab, like a trench, and to put in a pipe. These is not an uncommon thing. As a structural engineer, I see this all the time. Oh yeah, just chop out the slab, put in the pipe. But can I provide a calculation to say that is safe? In reality, I can't. There's no calculation that proves that. So that's technically unsafe, right? So we do run into those things sometimes. And but and also sometimes we run into these structures, right? That you walk in and you just say, oh no, oh no, this is not good. It's again, it's not that common. The vast majority of stuff that we have seen right now, I want to say maybe it's like 10% of the garages that we've walked in that have been unsafe in some fashion, even including these technically unsafe ones that we've run into. So, in general, it's there's not a lot of those really, really bad structures, right? We have not seen many of them.
Good to hear. So let's switch a little bit the topic, or sort of a tangential topic is electrical vehicles. I get a lot of questions about that. It's sort of the hot topic, and I think it's
Absolutely.
probably a whole separate category, related to the electrical and fire safety component to that. But how do you see electrical vehicles and the sort of the let's say the prevalence or the pending prevalence of electrical vehicles, depending on the presidential administration. They change everything in a year from now, but let's say that there is a mandate to install electrical vehicles. How does that impact the structure of a parking garage?
Yeah. In terms of the infrastructure for electric EV chargers and that kind of stuff, it's really not that big of a lift for structural, right? I mean, a lot of people, if you live in a single family home like me, you just kind of put a screw in the wall and you hang your charger on the brick wall and it's fine. So that's that's not too much of a lift, right? Those challenges are going to be more on your electrical system. I'm not really qualified to answer those questions. We'll need an electrical engineer to tell us how to, install a charging system. The interesting part of that from structural engineering is, the weight of the structure, right? The weight of the vehicles. Electric vehicles are heavier than regular combustion engine vehicles. We know that. But nothing has come of that yet in terms of regulation. We're also aware of it, but the building code doesn't say anything different, right? Right now in this inspection, DOB is just asking us to kind of give them a catalog of how many EV chargers are available. Maybe they're using it for some, data, looking at some sort of future regulations. Maybe not. I'm not sure what DOB is doing with that information. But as a structural engineer, I am anticipating at some point, our professional bodies, ASCE, the American Society of Civil Engineers, is a big one, to eventually review the requirements for designing structures, garages, and I anticipate that they will increase the required strength of structures that are used for parking because the vehicles are getting heavier.
Right. How much heavier like would you say is a electric vehicle versus a regular gas powered car? If you know.
Uh, they're about like 25% heavier
Right.
in most cases, which is significant, in structural engineering. Structural engineering, we have safety factors, we do things, but a lot of our safety factors are, maybe 33%. So if the loading is 25% more, that could lead to issues in the future. So I do anticipate seeing that. Of course, progress in anything is slow. So when that kicks in, is it 5 years, 6 years? But I do think that's going to happen. I think it's needed. I do think that that's something that really is needed. The fire protection is also, I think, an interesting question, right? Because the potential for these electric vehicles to kind of spontaneously break into fire
Right.
within a garage might also kind of kick up some of the requirements in terms of fireproofing building structures that are housing these vehicles. You don't often hear about a gas engine car just bursting into flames when it's parked.
Right.
That doesn't happen, but it happens with electric vehicles. So I think over this next decade, we're going to see some changes in the regulations related to the EVs.
Sure. So just going back to like the basics on PIPS and compliance, what steps can or what proactive steps can building owners take to, you know, make sure that they are compliant and let's say avoid penalties and sort of, I guess, also be proactive.
Yeah, start the process early, right? This is cycle one, so things might take a little bit longer. Um, and just be prepared for this to take time. It's not an engineer comes out and writes you a report and you're done. There'll be some back and forth. It's most often going to require some repair, actual construction project to come out of this. So even at the beginning, owners should sort of be thinking, a few months down the line, that they're going to need to also, have a construction project. In terms of fines and violations and all that, the biggest thing is what's always been true, and is that, putting off maintenance is a bad idea, right? You will pay for it down the line. So having a good maintenance program in place is a good idea. It doesn't always need to be, engineers doing it. If they have a building staff that's capable, that's fine, right? Looking for problems and fixing problems, drainage problems. That's so much of what goes wrong in these garages is because of moisture comes in on the cars and it sits on the structure and it eats away at the structure, right? So if your drains are broken, get them fixed, right? If there's puddles all around the garage that because it's not draining properly, do a repair, right? Get the drainage working. We are recommending to a lot of garages to install waterproofing on top of the slab. It's not common in New York City to see a waterproofed garage slab. If you think about maybe going to a suburban mall and parking in a big garage, it's often the mall is, the slab is painted, it's green, it's red, it's yellow. They make it seem like, oh, this is second floor, this is sections, D3, remember where you're parked. But that coating actually is waterproofing, and it actually is performing a function of, extending the longevity of the structure. So consider putting in waterproofing. And it's an investment, it's an expense. Every situation is going to be different, but that helps.
What,
And yeah, again,
what do you think the cost on that is? Like the waterproofing, like the coating?
yeah, traffic coatings can run anywhere from about $10 per square foot to like up to like $25 a square foot, depending on the manufacturer and the system. These are, it's not just like you paint on an epoxy paint like that you do in your garage. This is like a
Right.
multi pass system, and it usually has some sort of reinforcement like fleece put in, so that it can withstand the loads from the traffic passing,
So
repeatedly.
it's not something like the building staff could do. I mean, this is like some kind of heavy duty application, right?
No, this is like a specialized product that usually, is installed by, the specialized, contractor who would be associated with one of these systems. There's a whole bunch out there, a whole bunch of systems, with, common manufacturers. But yeah, this specialty contractor.
Right. And do you think that from a cost benefit analysis, owners would be ahead of the game if they did that? Would it pay for itself, or
I do. I think, looking at, the future of this PIPS program, um, cycle one is 6 years. The city just changed it a couple weeks ago. It might not even be that well known, but it's out there, that cycle two is only going to be 4 years, so you're going to have a 4-year cycle going forward. And, again, if people have been through these compliance things before, whenever you get an engineer coming in looking for compliance, we're gonna find things that need to be repaired. So by investing in this waterproofing coating, you should significantly reduce the amount of repairs that are needed every 4 years. Maybe you don't have to do any repairs for the next 25 years. Come back in cycle 5, and maybe, that's when the coating is starting to go, and you have to replace the coating, or maybe get some minor repairs. But the cost of doing these repairs is very, very high. The cost of doing any construction in New York City is very, very high. There's a lot of compliance that we have to deal with. So I think any measures that owners can take to reduce future work will pay off.
makes sense to me. So before we switch gears to some sort of more personal stuff, just so our viewers can learn a little bit more about you. So what would you say? And you might have already said this. Like, what do you think the big takeaway, like final, like thoughts for owners and managers regarding garage inspections and repairs?
Yeah, and that's to be proactive, to get ahead of it, to maintain, your maintenance program, have a maintenance program, if you don't have one, and to be doing it all the time, right? Don't wait for these deadlines to do all the repairs at once. Try to stay ahead of it, and get anything done. Little things come up, you can always call an engineer, you could call Rand. We're happy to do small projects as well. But really, going forward, and where the we're in cycle 1, right? So where, I mean, you haven't been doing a lot of maintenance. Get ahead of this by starting the process early. Start the process early, get the engineer in, let them go through this. If there's a lot of repairs required, if the conditions are very poor, it can be a very long process. It can take past those 2 to 3 months. It could take into 6, 7, 8 months even to get all of what we need to get done, just for the inspection.
Right. So get ahead of it. All right. So switching gears, hobbies and charitable organizations. Let's start with charities. Any charities you want to talk about or that you're involved with?
Sure. Yes. Thanks. I appreciate the chance to get to spread the word about this. I'm on the board of directors for a charity. It's called Limkind Foundation. It's dedicated to giving free prosthetic devices to children in need. The main part of the organization right now is traveling overseas to different third world countries. We just had a trip to Kenya, gave away about 40 prosthetic devices. A big team goes over there, they make these devices, on a shoestring budget, and then they actually will give these to the children. And then there's a team of mentor amputees that go there that will teach the kids how to use a prosthetic. You might think it's easy. Trying to walk with a prosthetic knee is not actually as simple as it seems. So, they're there for 2 weeks, and they do incredible work. We got trips coming up, 4 or 5 trips a year, every year. So, please, help them out. Anything is appreciate it. You can check them out on Instagram, Linkind Foundation, see the stories of the kids and how much this changes their lives. It's amazing. It's amazing. Some of these children have never had a prosthetic device before. They've lived their whole life, really not being able to walk. So it's a huge gift. As the organization grows, we're hoping to start doing this domestically also, be able to provide free pediatric prosthetics, for kids right here in New York City that, might not be able to, afford them. So, really, really a cause that's, close to my heart there.
That's great. No, thanks for providing that information. We'll make sure to put a link to that below. And what about for fun? What are you up to nowadays?
Yes, for fun, we do a lot of youth sports in the Vignola household. Just summer travel baseball right around the corner. I volunteer at the Forest Hills Youth Athletic Association, out in Forest Hills around Yellowstone Boulevard, to anyone that's familiar with that area. We just finished our baseball season. We had the All-Star game on Sunday, and I'm gearing up for the soccer draft. Soccer starts in September, so got the soccer draft tomorrow night. Coach my daughter, so this will be my first time coaching an all-girls team. So I've done a bunch of boys baseball, and now be doing girls soccer here in the fall. So I'm looking forward to that.
I'm gonna have to contact you for some coaching tips, because I haven't coached yet, but I think I'm taking the plunge for my son and my daughter next year, and
All right.
I could definitely use some advice. So
All right. My pleasure.
so listen, thanks so much for your time today, Jimmy. It was very informative. I'm sure everyone watching and listening learned a lot. Where can people contact you? What's like an email address, web address, phone number? What's the best way to reach you?
Yes, you can, find me as, Jimmy Vignola. You can look me up on LinkedIn. I'm active there. You can contact me direct message. At Rand, Rand Engineering, you can find, you can contact me through there. Our office number is 212-675-8844. The front receptionist will, direct you to me.
Okay.
And would love to, hear from anyone.
Great. All right. Thanks so much for your time. It was great speaking with you today.
Thanks for the opportunity to be here.
Great. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this content, please click like and subscribe. And remember to make every day great.